Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another edition of Storycraft. And yes, I am loving this. I had lots of fun doing the last one. Here we go with another one. This one was a request again by April because I harassed her into giving me one. So if you would like me to stop harassing April, you can leave a request in the comments below or send it to me directly via my socials. You know how to do that. But yeah, we're back with Storycraft. I have a story for you today. It is Hansel and Gretel, or as I am calling it, the story of Hansel and his much more clever sister, Gretel, because that's my story. So, obligatory disclaimer, which will now be a title card because I don't want to read it every time. So, read this. Great. Thanks for reading it. Here we go. So, once upon a time, there was a man, his wife, and their two children. Now, it's important to note, in this, in almost every version, the wife, is a stepmother, but in the original versions, it was just the mother. And this is a really common, stepmom trope in fairy tales and folklore. Where it's always the stepmom who is like evil. It can't be the mom for some reason. And the reason is really simple. As they were telling these stories, especially when you get to the Grimm's brothers, they were like, if we tell them the mom is evil, that will make children afraid of their moms or hate their moms or misbehave for their moms. So instead, we can all universally agree that moms are perfect, stepmoms the worst. And that's where this trope came from. Because you can't have a toxic mom, I guess. Which I believe many people would strongly disagree. But that is why you will always see an evil stepmother versus an evil mother. But we're going to kind of break the cycle here because I think it's okay if the mom is evil. It's fine. Sometimes the dads are evil too. They don't need to be step parents. Step parents do a lot of work. They're not always great. True. But I think they're people just like everybody else. So let's give them a fair shake. So there's a man, his wife, the original birth mother, and their two children, Hansel and Gretel. There's a lot of differing sources on whether or not Hansel and Gretel are twins, or if one of them is slightly older than the other. For the purposes of my story, Gretel will be the older child. But these children, they live in this home with their mom, and what their mom starts to realize as, time goes by and food is becoming scarcer, that children eat a lot. They eat so much that children will in fact eat you out of house and home if you have nothing else to give them. And because they're not doing very well, times are tough right now, the mom starts to get a little concerned because, her self-preservation drive kicks in. And she's like, if these kids continue to eat like this every single day, then I will have no food, which would be really bad. So I'm going to use my wisdom here, my thinking brain to come up with a solution for this. So she turns to her husband and she's like, husband, these children eat so much. They eat more than we do. And we just keep giving them all the food we have. And eventually we will have none. And then we will all die. It makes much more sense to get rid of these children so that we can survive, because we can always have more children, but we can't have more us. And the husband, who in most stories is sort of pictured as a sympathetic, like, pushover, like he's super whipped by his wife. Not in my version, but for the sake of posterity, in every version it seems like he's a big pushover, so they give him a pass for being a coward, I guess, and letting his wife bully him. But not in this version. In this version, the husband is like, you know what, you're right. You're actually right. These kids do eat a lot, but what do you do? What do you think we should do? Because we can't just leave them in the woods to die. That would be, and she's like, that's it, say less. You said the whole plan, the entirety of the plan. This is great because if the elements take them, we're not responsible. So what you're going to do is tomorrow, you're going to take these kids, you're going to march them out into the woods and leave them there. And then they will die and we will continue to live. And when things are better, we'll try this whole thing again. And the dad's like, okay, all right. But what these parents don't know is that because they are struggling and these children are hungry, they aren't sleeping during the course of this conversation. So Hansel and Gretel hear the entire story. And as the parents get ready to go to bed for the evening, Hansel turns to Gretel and he says, Gretel, what are we going to do? Our parents are going to leave us in the woods. And she's like, you know what, Hansel, rest your head. I will take care of this. And so Gretel sneaks out of bed and she goes into the garden and she sees outside that there are all these tiny little pebbles that shine like starlight underneath the light of the moon. So she's like, perfect. She gathers them all up, tucks them into her little pinafore and, goes back to bed. And then the next morning they join their father, who's a woodcutter, I guess. Let's say he's a woodcutter. And, he takes them with him out into the woods. And as they're leaving, Gretel is slyly dropping these little pebbles behind her, leaving a trail back to the house. And when they get out into the woods, the dad's like, okay, you guys stay here by the fire. Here's a slice of bread for each of you. I'm going to go cut wood. And then, when I get back, we'll all go home. And they're like, cool. And the dad F's off, but he doesn't go to cut wood. He goes to rig up a little tied up branch situation with some twine from his pocket, and this branch contraption that he has rigged up, when the wind blows, it sounds like the sound of an axe chopping wood because the branch is snapping back against another tree. I don't know the logistics of it. Don't quiz me on how this wood contraption is built. That's just what he does. So he builds this little contraption and then he F's off and goes back home. Him and the wife are celebrating because they have freed themselves from the awful burden of irresponsible choices that led them to having children. Not the children. The children aren't the burden. Their bad decisions are. And, they're celebrating, and by the time night falls, they're like, great, a bear will probably take them. They're out of our hair. They go to bed peacefully. And as night falls for the children, Hansel looks to Gretel and he's like, okay, well, clearly he's not coming back. What do we do? And Gretel's like, look, just wait for the moon to come up. And the moon comes up and there it is, a sparkling path to lead them back home. So, they both follow the path of little tiny stones. They go back to the house. They get back into bed and act like nothing happened. And in the morning, when the wife and husband wake up, they see that their children are home, and the husband's kind of relieved. He felt a little bit guilty about it, but he's still like, well, that's not great. And the wife is like, dang it. Let me try this again. And she's like, I don't know how you could mess this up. It seems pretty straightforward. Take them even farther into the woods and leave them. And the husband's like, oh, okay, that's probably the issue. I should have probably taken them farther into the woods. Of course, again, Hansel and Gretel overhear this story because their parents don't realize that they're all living in the same place, I guess. And Hansel turns to Gretel and he's like, Gretel, what are we going to do? And she's like, don't worry, just don't eat all your bread. And so they don't eat all the bread that they're given. She hides it away, and over the course of the night, she crumbles it up into little crumbs, stuffs that into her pinafore, and goes to sleep. So in the morning, the dad's like, all right, sorry that you guys got lost, out there. I thought I told you how to get back home, but clearly our wires got crossed and you just totally misunderstood the situation. But I'm so happy you guys came back because I'm a liarson. But this time we're going to go into the woods and cut wood again. And you guys are just going to wait for me to be finished so you can help me carry it home. And they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, we totally believe that the same thing isn't going to happen again, even though this is the same setup as before. So they follow her dad out into the woods. He builds a fire. He sets up a little bit of snacks for them, some bread. And he's like, okay, guys, I know we're in this strange part of the woods. We've never been this deep before. Don't be suspicious. Just stay here. And he doesn't even bother rigging up his little wood chopping trap this time. This time he just runs home because he's like, maybe they followed me and I just didn't hear them. I'm going to go as fast as I can. So dad, like, F's off back to the house. They're sitting there. Hansel's like, okay, I hope you have a better plan this time. And she's like, don't worry. The entire time we were walking here, I was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. We'll follow those to get home. And they don't even wait for nightfall this time because you can't see breadcrumbs at night. But also, why? And so they start following the trail of breadcrumbs back, but then they see that there are a whole bunch of birds along the path who are now flying away because they showed up. And they all fly away, and Hansel's like, oh no, the birds ate all the breadcrumbs, Gretel. How are we going to find our way home? And Gretel's like, shoot, I don't know. Why do I have to do all the thinking for you, Hansel? But then she calms down a little bit. They walk for a little while, thinking that maybe they'll be able to see something familiar that will lead them back home. They don't have any luck doing that. They wander for a little bit until a little white bird appears. And it's such a pretty little bird that they're sort of like enchanted by it a little bit. And they follow the bird to this house made entirely of gingerbread and candy. And I'm talking like gingerbread siding, candy cane like gutters, clear sugar candy like windows, royal icing piping for like, I don't know, the house numbers. This place is decked out. Gumdrops, goodies, every candy from the penny aisle is used in this house. And they are just like so hungry. They were already kind of hungry before. They've only ever had like a slice of bread for food. So they see this house and they go to eat it. And Gretel's at first like, I don't know if it's safe. Maybe we shouldn't. Hansel's like, I can't hear you. Candy is calling my name. And he just starts munching away on the house. And then Gretel's like, F it, might as well, because I am also hungry and a child. And so she starts eating the house too. And what they don't know is that inside of this house is a witch. And not just any witch, but a child-eating witch who has built this entire house with the intention of luring in children. And there's a couple things you need to know about witches. In this story, and apparently all fairy tale stories by the Brothers Grimm, they are ugly old women because the ageism is real, and they're also blind. Magic makes you go blind. She's either blind or nearly blind. I'm gonna go with nearly blind, like legally blind, because I think it makes more sense. But once they start nibbling on this house, her witchy senses start tingling. The trap has been sprung. So she comes outside, but she puts on this show of being very feeble and like super elderly. Not just like elderly, but like extreme elderly. So she comes out on these crutches and she's like, hello, are there children out here? And they're like, oh, excuse us, ma'am. We were just so hungry. We were lost. We saw your house. And she's like, you're eating my house? Do you normally eat houses? And they're like, oh my God, we are so sorry. It's just, your house is made of candy. And she's like, yes, I made it out of my favorite things. That doesn't mean you can eat it. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry. Like, can we make it up to you? And she's like, no, don't worry about it. We'll just make some more candy together and repair the damage. Why don't you children come inside since you were lost and so scared in the woods? And they're like, we are lost and scared. That would be really great. So they go inside the house and Hansel is just spilling the beans because this kid cannot keep his mouth shut. It might also be the sugar. And he's telling the whole witch their entire life story, all about how their parents abandoned them. And she's like, that sounds so sad. Little boy, why don't you come over here? Come out back here with me. So she takes him out back. And behind the house, there is no more candy. There's just wood and cold steel. She tosses him into like a stable. Not a cage. I know most stories say a cage. The version I heard has like a wooden stall, like the kind that you keep horses in. So she tosses him to the stall, locks it up. He can't get out. The walls are super high and very slippery with no handholds. So he's stuck in there. I kind of like the idea of him being in a stall like an animal because while he's in there, and Gretel's like beating on this old lady, she tosses her cast, like her crutches aside, and she's like, aha! Turns out I'm actually a hale, hearty old woman, and I don't need these crutches. I just I'm a little bit visually impaired. And so what's going to happen here is that if you want your brother to, be all right, you're going to help me by working for me. And what I'm going to do is feed your brother lots of food. So you're going to help me cook for him. And Gretel's like, suspicious. This is very, very sus, but I have no other choice. So she starts helping the witch out. I like to think the witch was like low key showing her how to do magic, but like maybe not intentionally because she can't see. So she was making her like read her spells and stuff. It's not relevant to the story. It's just what I like to canonize. But she starts helping out the witch by working for her around the house, helping her cook the food that they bring to Hansel, and they start to feed him continuously. So she sort of catches on, Gretel does, to the fact that the witch is intentionally fattening her brother up. Everything they make is really fattening. It's all cookies and cakes and sweeties. And she's like, if she's fattening up my brother, then I think I know where this is going. And while doing the cleaning for her one day, Gretel stumbles upon a bin that's meant to be taken out, and discarded as trash. But inside of the bin, she finds some bones that look suspiciously like they belong to children who may have been at the house before. So Gretel, being a very smart, clever girl, puts all the pieces together. She's like, this witch is trying to eat my brother. After she eats my brother, she's going to throw me into the stall and eat me too. I got to get out of here. But first I have to make sure that Hansel stays alive. And because he cannot keep his mouth shut, I need to get ahead of him on this. So while she's helping the witch prepare these meals, she takes one of the chickens, she breaks a bone out of there, sticks it in her handy dandy pinafore. And when they go out to feed Hansel and the witch starts to head back to the house, Gretel hands him the little chicken bone, and she says, when the witch comes to feel your finger to see how fat you've gotten, put out this chicken bone like it is your finger, and do not tell her that your clothes are starting to not fit you because you have gained so much weight. Keep your mouth shut, use this bone. And he's like, okay, I'll do what you say. All of your ideas have been good, even if they haven't been great. But I have no ideas because I started eating the house. I ate the house first, so it's kind of my fault. So the witch comes out. She's like, let's see how big you've gotten. And because she can't see very well, when he stretches out his finger and she squeezes it, she is alarmed that he is so skinny, because by now he should be like a big ball of fat, and he isn't. And this witch, she's not just a cannibal of children. She's not just a devourer of infants. She's a connoisseur. And, she doesn't just like regular beef. She likes a bit of Wagyu. So she needs her meat to be fatty. And this child is clearly starving and she can't understand it. But she chalks it up to like maybe adolescence, maybe it's puberty. And he just like super heightened metabolism, burning fat so quickly. So she ups her game and she starts bringing out more food for him to cook, which means more work for Gretel. But they continue to do this, a couple more times, where she goes out to feel his finger, is alarmed at how thin he is, so she keeps bringing him out more food to eat. Poor Hansel probably has diabetes at this point because he's eating all this food, and he's like delirious from it, so he's just hanging out in this animal stall, surrounded by food that he can probably not even eat or digest properly. And she continues to feed him until one day she gets so fed up. She's like, enough, I don't even care. I am starving, and your brother is not getting any bigger. So you're going to help me cook your brother. And Gretel's like, okay, yeah, great. How do I do that? And she's like, we're going to put him in the oven, and I'm going to roast him like a pig. And Gretel's like, great, that seems like a really good idea. Maybe it'll help solve the skinniness issue. And she's like, so how do I do that? Like, what can I do? And the witch is like, climb into the oven and see if it's hot enough. And Gretel's like, how does that work though? I'm not really certain. Like, by hot enough? What do you mean? And the witch is like, hot enough to cook something? And she's like, okay. I guess that makes sense. But when you say climb into the oven, how would one go about climbing into ovens? You see, where I'm from, we can't climb into our ovens. They're so small. So I don't think there's any way I could possibly fit into the oven to see if it's hot enough. There's no way. Because, I don't even think I can get my arm in there to just test the temperature. And the witch is like, oh my God, you are the dumbest girl I have ever met. watch. So she gets in front of the oven, she puts her head inside, and she gestures to all the room around her because it's a giant, like, pizza oven style oven. And she's like, look at how big this oven is. It's got so much space. And Gretel's like, you're right. I didn't notice that before. And while she's saying this, Gretel just gives her a huge shove, shoves the witch entirely inside, and then she slams the iron door, locks her into the oven, and she's like, oh, it was big enough for a person. Great. And because Gretel may have gone a little bit crazy in the time that she was working for this evil witch, she cranks up the heat on the oven and is like, first of all, I hate you. Second of all, you should have been reported to OSHA ages ago. These are not working conditions, even for a child. And third of all, my brother and I are getting out of here. So she goes and, she gets Hansel out of the stall, rolls him back to the house. The witch is now burning alive, and amidst her screams of, like, terror and turning into candy smoke, I guess, because she's a candy witch, they go around her house, and they see that in her house there are all these, like, little treasure chests full of gold and jewels. So Hansel stuffs his pockets full, and she stuffs her pinafore full, and they're like, great, with this money we won't have to worry about our family starving anymore, so let's go back home to our house and show our parents what we got. I'm going to imagine they maybe found a way to take more than just pocketfuls of gold and jewels with them, because I don't think that would last very long. Also, I'm pretty confident in saying that the house probably burns down because Gretel made the fire too hot, and it's made of cookies. So yeah, I think they found some clever way, Gretel did, clearly, because she's the thinker here, to bring all the gold and jewels back home. And when they get back home, they somehow knew the way. I guess she figured out the way home in the time that she spent working for the witch, or maybe she used some magic that she learned from the witch to find their way home, like a little location spell. But when she gets back home, apparently during the time that they were away, the mom just dies, because that's how they wrote the story. And the dad is, like, overjoyed that they are back, because he never wanted to get rid of them. And they use the money to live happily ever after in comfort for the rest of their lives, yada, 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 the end. Not in my story, no. In my story, they get back, both parents are alive, because why would she die? And during the course of that, they're like, hey, we're home. We're actually not staying here. We just wanted to show you that we have all these gold and jewels now. We're going to go buy our own place to live and new parents. And that's what they do. They go to the parent store, they pick up new parents, and then their new family loves them. And they report their old family to CPS, so they can't come after them for any of that. And then they live happily ever after with their foster family and all their riches. And that's it. That's the story of Hansel and Gretel. So there's a couple of versions of this, the most popular being the Brothers Grimm. I don't like the Brothers Grimm version particularly, outside of the little detail about her having a pinafore, because I think that's really cute. But mostly because, like, it gets really, really Christianized, and they're sort of, like, praying all the bad things away, and also because the Brothers Grimm version makes it so that Hansel is the brains of the group, and Gretel has no agency, but somehow has the sense enough to push the witch into the oven. And I don't like that version. I like my version better. I like a clever Gretel. But also I think it works if she's older too, and Hansel is younger, because then she's just a big sister who's, like, looking out for her little brother. But that's it. There's a couple of versions of the story. I know that there's an Italian version, and there's, like, an even older version that might be Arabic, and they're a little bit of a variation on the tale. They're a little bit different endings, but this is, like, the most widely known version. It's the version I grew up with, so I like that. There's a couple movies out too. That Hansel and Gretel, like, witch hunters movie, which is fun to watch, but a horrible movie. And then there's that other one with the girl from It, and I haven't seen that one yet, but I haven't heard as many reviews about it being fun to watch but bad, just reviews about it being bad. So I don't know. Those are fun things to follow up with if you are interested in this story and want to kind of get a little more immersed or expand the lore of it a little bit. There is a version where they aren't even particularly starving, like there's no food shortage. The mom just wants to get rid of them. And of course, because in all these versions it's the stepmom, they're like, the stepmom just doesn't want to raise somebody else's kids. So she's like, I know we're not struggling, but these kids are the worst. Like, fucking ditch them. And the dad is like, yeah, you're right, I have no spine, so let me get rid of my beloved children. And then she just dies mysteriously. I have seen a couple of like fan theories that the reason that the stepmother dies is because she's actually the witch. But that doesn't make sense to me in the like grand scheme of things, because she could have just eaten them as opposed to leaving them in the woods and then being like upset that they came back and doing that like run around a couple times. If she's the witch, she would have just eaten them. Like, why go through all this to lure them to her house? You're the witch. Also, she could have just taken them straight to the candy house and then eaten them there. So that theory has a lot of holes in it, but maybe like when one wicked thing dies, another wicked thing dies, or something like that. But most versions, the mom dies by the time they get back, and the dad is relieved, and they live happily ever after. And that to me just sort of gives the dad a free pass to have abandoned his children. So that's why we call CPS in my version. But as always, if you guys made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces, and I will catch you guys all in the next video. And if you have any requests for Storycraft, let me know. Because I'll keep crafting as long as I keep having stories to tell. That's not true. I'll do both either way. I'll probably keep telling stories. The point is that if I have to pick the story, it's going to get weirder as time goes on. So if you want maybe some more logical stories, maybe some strange stories, just leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep picking whatever I feel like. And I'll catch you guys in the next one, though, because I am still rambling. Bye!